really believe in something, you better say it enough times that you grow sick of hearing yourself say it. Otherwise, you've not said it enough for it to bleed into the culture. I said to the team, we are going to be number one, unreasonable hospitality. See, I had 2 jobs then, which I believe are the same 2 jobs that any great leader has every day that they walk into work. 1, to clearly tell the team where we were going. People crave leadership, and they crave conviction in that leadership. And 2, to invite as many of them as possible to sit with me so we could collectively figure out how we were going to get there. People, especially these younger generations, they crave a sense of ownership. And so together with the team, we started to figure out together what unreasonable hospitality meant. In the beginning, we did what felt obvious. We looked at the experience we were serving and tried to figure out how to make elements of it, well, more hospitable. We reinvented how we welcomed people into the restaurant. We changed how we took people's orders, how we delivered their food, and did some pretty cool innovations that started moving us in the right direction. But one day I had a moment of realization that we were focusing only on the most obvious touch points in the experience, which by definition were the very same ones our competitors were focusing on. See, one thing I've come to realize, not just in my time running that company, but in the years since, as I've worked with leading companies across pretty much every industry, is that very few organizations actually know what every touch point in the experience is because they've never slowed down for long enough to genuinely understand the experience as a whole. So one day, I closed the restaurant for lunch. I brought in the entire team, and we did an exercise that I now call an interrogation of the guest journey. By the way, I'm going to talk about a couple of these meetings. Meetings where we really sought to innovate the hospitality we are offering. Every time we had one, we included everyone, from dishwashers all the way up through to ownership. The reason for that, there's a retired naval captain named David Marquet who famously said that in most organizations, the people at the top have all the authority and none of the information, while the people on the front line have all the information and none of the authority. To really do anything of significance in pursuit of your customers, you need to bridge that gap, and there are a few better ways to do it than just getting everyone in a room together. We broke the team up into groups, kind of like this, and gave everyone one of those long rolls of paper, a bunch of markers, and I said to them, hey, I want you to name, with excruciating specificity, every single touch point in the experience, every moment of interaction between us and the people we're serving, from the moment they decide to join us until however long after they've left. Note that too many companies deem the experience to be over the moment someone has paid the bill, but you can extend it in perpetuity if you so choose. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, someone walks through the door, that's a touch point. They unfold their napkin, that's a touch point. They wash their hands in the bathroom, that's a touch point. Every little thing. The team got started right away, but about an hour in, they all started raising their hands, saying they were done. And on average, they'd only identified about 30 touch points. I pushed them further. An hour later, they'd gotten that number up to about 70. I pushed them again. After 3 hours, though, each group, on average, had identified about 130 touch points. Okay, that was enough, at least to get started. Because now that we'd isolated all of them, now the fun part started. Now we can start elevating as many of them as possible. I'll give you an example. If the 3 of you were dining with us, well, actually, let me back up. Towards the end of everyone's list, it said, we dropped the check, right? Every restaurant in the world, millions of restaurants, at the end of those meals, someone is bringing you a bill. And yet, in spite of the fact that every restaurant has that touch point in common, I have never seen it approached with any creativity or any intention. Perhaps it's because we have a flawed belief system that the transactional moments can't also be connected. Or perhaps it's, well, I shouldn't say no one. Have you guys ever been to a diner where they bring you the little red and white pinwheel mint with the bill? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's innovation. It's actually really impactful innovation. I have no idea why they decided to do this, but Cornell University, they ran a study. they compared 1,000 diners that give a mint with the check to 1,000 diners that don't. The ones that did, on average, had 18% higher tips than the ones that didn't. It's just a little proof point that generosity begets generosity, and asymmetrically, you give a little bit, you always get more in return. The value of the tips far exceeded the cost of those mints. But outside of that, I've never seen any innovation. I think in part because it's a hard thing from a timing perspective to get right. Everyone in the world, you all know this, they get very impatient the moment they ask for the bill. If it takes us too long to give it to them, we've ruined the meal. At the same time, we can't put it on their table before they've asked for it, otherwise what do they think we're trying to do? Rush them out. It's also really hard in a fine dining restaurant, because let's name it, it's a big bill. And the moment you know how much that meal costs, it's marginally more difficult to still love the experience you've just had. For those reasons, no innovation. But, well, now that we've written it down, we had an opportunity to make that part of the meal awesome. I use that word awesome a lot. I feel like we get older, we feel the need to be more mature, act more professionally. We stop using words like awesome. But if you were in the business of making people happy, which, by the way, that's the business we're all in, that is a big part of our jobs. Just to make as many little things just a little bit more awesome as we possibly can. This is what we came up with. 3 of you are dining with us. We know you're done. You haven't asked for the check, but it's clear. I'd go over to your table with a glass for each one of you and an entire bottle of cognac. And I'd pour just a splash of cognac into each glass, and I'd say, hey, thank you so much for joining us. This is just a little cognac. It's with our compliments. In fact, I'm just going to leave the entire bottle here. Please help yourselves to as much as you'd like. And then I put the check down. I'd say your check is here, ready whenever you are. Small change, but profound impact. First, no one ever had to wait for the check again. Second, no one could ever think I was trying to rush them out. I just gave these 3 people an entire bottle of free booze. It didn't cost us very much. Rarely did anyone drink more than the splash we poured into their glasses, and yet, at the moment we dropped off that big bill, we matched it with a gesture of profound generosity, keeping the value proposition intact. Perhaps my favorite part, the greatest hospitality destinations are those that make it feel like you've just been invited to someone's house for dinner. My favorite part when I have people to mine is that moment at the end of the night where there's just a few people left and someone grabs that last half-empty bottle of wine and pours the remains into the remaining glasses. At the end of an evening where we had served their every need with unbelievable attentiveness, we gave them the gift of serving one another. All because we wrote down this overlooked touch point and decided to make it matter. And by the way, I've talked to people who dined with us back then, who, in spite of the fact that we were serving some of the best food in the entire world, they don't remember a single thing they ate, but they will never forget how we made them feel when we brought over that cognac. We're not the only ones who have done this. Raise your hands if you've ever had a cheeseburger at Five Guys. Okay. Now, just shout it out for me. What do you think of when you think of Five Guys? Peanuts. Exactly. Why? Because of all the fast food chains out there, and there are a lot of them, Five Guys is the only one that I know of anyway that had the wherewithal to recognize that the time spent waiting for your burger to be cooked is a touch point. And they're the only ones that do anything with it. Now, say what you will about what they do. They put in a box of peanuts, you rip them out of the shell, you eat them while you wait. Maybe it's to offer up a bit of generosity. Maybe it's to warn you that the fries are cooked in peanut oil. It doesn't matter. Because they do something where no one else does anything. It gives them an unfair competitive advantage. See, the smallest enhancements to those least likely touch points can have the greatest impact on the experience as a whole. Because it is you saying very clearly to your customers, we are willing to care about things that no one else has even paused for long enough to consider. You can come to these things and get fired up and go home and nothing changes, but I encourage all of you, when you go home in the next month, identify one touch point that you've never thought about, make it a little bit more awesome, and look at the impact it can have. We did this stuff up and down the experience. Big things like the cognac with the check, and lots of little things too, but remember, the little changes also matter. Raindrops make oceans. The culmination of enough small enhancements on their own can become transformational. But still, I wasn't sure we'd figured out what it meant to be unreasonable. For me, that is a big word. I believe it calls you to greatness. And then one day I was in the dining room on a busier than normal lunch service. The team was just getting killed. It was all hands on deck. And I was doing what I always do when I help out the team. I was clearing dirty plates. I think that's just a good reminder when you find yourself at the top of the hierarchy and you make the choice to help the team. Try doing the most menial task as often as possible. It's a great way to remind them that you're never going to ask them to do something that you are either incapable or unwilling to do yourself. And I found myself clearing appetizers from a table of 4. They were foodies, Europeans on vacation to New York, just to eat at our greatest restaurants. In fact, this was their last meal. They were headed straight to the airport from the restaurant to go back home. And by the way, before I tell this story, if you recognize this from the show The Bear, just know that they got it from me, not the other way around. While I was there clearing their plates, I overheard them talking, and they were raving about the trip they'd had. They'd been to Le Bernardin and Danielle and Jean-Georges and Percé and now 11 Madison Park. And if you don't know those restaurants, trust in how fancy and French the names are. They're the good ones in New York. But one woman jumped into the conversation and said, yeah, but guys, we never had a New York City street hot dog. You know that moment in a cartoon where the light bulb goes off over the character's head? I went back into the kitchen, dropped off the plates, ran outside of the hot dog cart in front of the restaurant, bought a hot dog, ran back inside. You all know what it's like to work with chefs. You'll get this. That was the hard part, convincing him to actually serve it in our fancy restaurant. But I told him to trust me, told him it was important to me. And eventually he cut that hot dog up into 4 perfect pieces, put one on each plate, added a little swish of ketchup, a swish of mustard, a perfect little cannelle of sauerkraut and relish to each plate. I'm pretty sure he finished it off with a micro herb or something to make it look fancy. Then before their final savory course, which at the time was our honey lavender glazed Muscovy duck that had been dry aged for 2 weeks, I brought out what we in New York call a dirty water dog to the table. And I explained it. I said, hey, I overheard you talking before. We couldn't let you go home with any culinary regrets. Here is that New York City hot dog. And guys, they freaked out. I've worked in restaurants my entire life, some of the best in America. I have served tens of millions of dollars of Wagyu beef and lobster and foie gras and caviar, and I can confidently say that to that point in my career, I had never seen anyone react the way they did to that hot dog. You know, athletes are always going to the tapes when they've had a bad game. They do it to identify the mistakes they made, to try to make sure they don't repeat those mistakes. What they don't do often enough, what none of us do often enough, is go to the tapes when we've had a good game, to identify the things we did well, to make sure that we keep on doing those things. That's how you put intention to intuition. So I went to the tapes on the hot dog. What happened to make that happen? And what could we all start doing to make sure that things like that could start happening all the time? There's 3 things. The first, it just required being present, which is kind of an annoyingly overused phrase these days, but when it comes to people, to relationships, to hospitality, it is everything. I define being present as just choosing to care so much about that one person in front of you that you stop caring about everything else you need to do. And these days, with these as perpetual distractions in our pockets and our ever-growing to-do list, it's getting hard even for the best of us to do that consistently well. I think we've developed a flawed relationship with efficiency. We believe that the more efficient we try to be, the more efficient we will become. That works until it doesn't. Anyone who's ever worked in a restaurant dining room can relate to the idea that had I been optimizing for efficiency when I was clearing those plates, I would have been scanning the room to see what else I needed to do and in what order I needed to do it to get the team out of the weeds as quickly as possible. But had I been doing that, I never would have picked up on that throwaway line about the hot dog. See, sometimes we just need to slow down in order to speed up. The second, it required the notion that, yeah, if you want to be successful, you better take what you do seriously. And also, we all need to stop taking ourselves so seriously. Way too often, especially in luxury, we let these self-imposed standards get in the way of us giving others the things that will bring them the most joy. We've become so focused on perfecting brands that we are not nearly focused enough on pursuing people. A hot dog in a 4-star restaurant, that could not be more off-brand, but when you look at how it made them feel, you have to ask yourself, who cares? And third, listen, I like to redefine the word hospitality every year or so. I think that's just a good exercise to go through with anything you care about, because as leaders, the better we are at articulating an idea, the better we become at compelling those around us to embrace it. One of my favorite definitions of hospitality, it's about making other people feel seen. And if that's the case, the best way to do it is not to treat them like a commodity. It's not one size fits all. It's to treat them like unique individuals. I really believe I could have given that same table a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon and a bucket of caviar. It would not have had the same impact as the $2 hot dog, because it would not have been specific to them. See, in unreasonable hospitality, one size fits one. The best gestures will always be specific to that individual. Now, I was pretty sure we'd figured out what unreasonable hospitality meant. And if that hot dog became our new true north in those 3 things, we had a roadmap. And so every night in pre-meal for weeks, I would say to the team, hey, go out there and make this your own. Be present. Stop taking yourself so seriously. Find these one-size-fits-one gestures for our guests. They were fired up. It sounded fun.